What is good, people? Welcome back to another video. Now in today's video we're going to be addressing a few things. This video is going to address the people who already own a Mark III Golf and some people who may be looking at purchasing one. So the Mark III Golf was sold from 92 to 97. Now there probably was a few run out models in 91 and 98, but that's generally the gist of it. The engines that come in the Mark III Golf from the UK is the 1.4, 1.6, 1.8, the 2 litre, and then the 2.8, that's the petrol engines. And then you've got the 1.9 SDI, I believe, and then the TDI. If there's anything in this video I've done inaccurate or I've missed something out, do put it in the comments down below. So comparing the Mark III to the Mark II, everything's bigger and better. So more headroom, it's taller, it's wider, it's longer, the wheelbase is bigger, and also the wheel track is wider. So if you used to put a Mark II and a Mark III next to each other, you'd notice that the Mark III wheels actually sit out wider, and that just gives it better handling, better turning and stuff. That's often why a lot of people put Mark III bits on Mark IIs to upgrade the steering and suspension of their cars. I guess sometimes it triggers me because Mark IIIs always get the slack. They're not good looking, they're not good and stuff, they're crap cars, nobody likes them. But the Mark II and the Mark I owners nick all the bits off them anyway, so they can't be too bad. So my experiences with Mark III Golf, my first Volkswagen was an actual Mark III. I had 2 Peugeots before that, and then I went straight into the Mark III Golf. It was a GTI, I was loving life, and to be honest, that car was not problematic at all. I think one of the window regulators went on it, and that's about it. I did crash it, that's the reason why I no longer have it. But that car was nice, I loved it. It was 8-valve GTI, it was 5-door, dragon green, same colour as this car. And yeah, I loved it. They are well spec'd up, so you still got all your creature comforts, power steering, electric windows, ABS, everything's still there as standard. And the car just worked. I enjoyed it, and yeah, sad that I crashed it. So the next car I bought was the Estate. I bought a red, I think it was a chili red Estate. It wasn't directly after, I had a few cars and then I bought that. And because the car was previously modified and kind of messed about with, I had a couple of issues with that car. Again, window reg issues, and there was also a problem with the oil light was coming on. When you revved it, it went away, so I think probably oil pump was going or something of that kind. And then started to have fueling issues, which I never really managed to get to the bottom of. I did replace the fuel pump, but you could probably be looking at injectors or something else like that. I got rid of that, and now we're on to this car. I bought this in 2019. Did I? Yeah, flip it now. Bought this in 2019, and I saw it cheap. And I thought, you know what, I wasn't actually looking for cars. Do you know when you browse in the internet and you're like, oh, I'll see what's out there? I wasn't actually intending to buy a car, I just saw it and I thought, it's a GL spec, so it's top spec, it's got everything with it. It's got the 2 litre 8-valve, which came in the GTIs, so I knew the engine was a good engine. And the mileage was fairly low, it was about 80,000, somewhere around there. It still had MOT, it just looked a bit rough around the edges. And then I set about trying to put everything right. So obviously the headliner was absolutely destroyed, the whole piece was dropping down on my head. As you can see now, we've trimmed it all up to look better. Anyway, this car's broken down on me once, well, twice technically speaking, but they were both the same issue. These cars suffer with crank sensor problems. The crank sensor is right in the front of the engine, right next to the oil filter, and the cabling that goes around the wires, it crumbles, goes brittle over time, the wires touch together, stops the car from starting. Fix that, no problem. And apart from the old window regulator air and the odd water leak, which these are quite common for, this did have a thermostat issue where it was stuck open. We've recently rectified in a video, so go check it out. You've obviously got your gear knob play, which for these cars and this type of gear change system, it's really common. Also, we fixed the glove box. This handle had completely snapped off, and inside there the actual catch that had broke. You've got to remember, this car cost me £500 at the start, and it was good to go. I had no dramas with it, it drove fine, and I've spent more modifying it than I've maintaining it. I think is about it for the maintenance of this car. It's not wanted a lot for £500. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every single Mark III is reliable. Sometimes these cars just don't have the right owners, don't look after them, they don't do the oil changes when they're supposed to. So when you buy them, you end up having to rectify all them issues. But it's just how it goes. If you was to buy something like this, I have always said you need to have more money than your budget, because you're going to need to fix it eventually. Now I'm actually going to address the question now. Should you buy a Mark III Golf? 100%, 1,000,000%. They're great cars, they're cheap to buy now, they're only starting to come up in value, they're easy to maintain. I've been working on cars ever since I was 16 and they're just easier. The engine bay is accessible, there's no fancy emissions and stuff like that, there's no crazy engine plastics. If you was to compare this engine bay to a modern car, you will see the difference. The amount of extra emissions, creature comforts, all that stuff that's put inside that engine bay and crammed in there, so it's actually harder to work on. I remember working on my Mark II Jetta and it had the battery relocation. I could stand in the engine bay with the engine and gearbox still in it and I remember doing it because I just wanted to see if I could do it. So it just gives you an idea of, if you was to start learning working on cars, this is the car you'd want to start on, because there's no fancy electrics on it. It's still got its OBD port, which is basically its onboard diagnostics, so you can still plug it in if there are any engine management lights or anything on. Parts are still cheap for this car. I remember picking up the thermostat, £10, the water pump, 20 quid, a couple of belts, tenner each. Obviously if you're going to go to genuine Volkswagen parts, they're going to be a bit more expensive, but they're not expensive to maintain. Brakes are cheap, suspension is cheap. What more do you want? It's in that age gap where things aren't too old, but they're modern enough to still be able to plug the car in. You've still got ABS, you've still got power steering, you've still got, in fact I've got heated seats in mine still. And what more do you want? It's got aircon, it's got all the electric you want, electric sunroof, electric windows, mirrors, door locks all still work. If you was to list everything that I've just mentioned and spec it up to another car, some 2017 cars don't even have that. Your Vauxhall Corsas, some of them don't have aircon, some of them don't have heated seats. So just buy one. Although there isn't a massive following for these cars, there are plenty of Facebook groups. I'm in pretty much 90% of them. And I apologise if I annoy you, because I'm always spamming my YouTube channel in them. But there are tons. There's loads of classified pages. There's a lot of support out there. In terms of content creators on YouTube to follow, the only 3 people I know at the minute, now it's not to say anybody else aren't doing it, me, Project 7, there's Christian Smith, who's been doing it for a lot longer than I have, and he knows a lot more than I do. He does a lot of Mark III stuff. And then you've got the VW Garage, and that's it. So there's not a huge amount of content support online, but there are tons of guides and tutorials. I post quite a few tutorials on this, Christian Smith does, so does Greg, who's got the VW Garage channel. Now if you're watching this video and you have your Mark III Golf and you're thinking about selling it this year, don't. I won't. They're now getting to that age where they're starting to come up in value. Like I've said before in the video, they're coming up to 30 years old. Now I know when the Mark IIs were hitting 30 years old, they were worth quite a good amount of money. They still are. Now the Mark III will never grow at the same rate as the Mark II and the Mark I does. I'll never admit that, but what I will admit is that they are on the increase. A cool fact I found out today when I was looking for some research is that they built 6.3 million Mark IIs and only 4.8 million Mark IIIs. So technically speaking, yeah, fuck it, I'm going to say it, the Mark IIIs are rarer. People are ripping up nice Mark IIIs because there was at that age where nobody really cared about them. You know, you could get them really cheap, rip the engine out, put it in your Mark II, rip the seats out, put it in your Mark II. Subframe, suspension, all your steering components, all that can bolt straight onto the Mark II. And so the Mark III was dying off even quicker. So yeah, I'm going to say it, the Mark III is technically speaking more rarer than the Mark II. Now, if you're comparing it to how many are currently on the road, there's probably more Mark IIIs on the road, but there's no denying that from how many are built, the Mark IIIs are a rarer car. Put it in a garage somewhere, store it, and over time fix the rusty wings, the rusty sills and the rusty floors. They're all going to eventually get to that point if they've not been sorted out already, but there's no denying they won't be worth good money in the future, and I believe that they will, which is why I'm keeping mine. Mine's a golf estate, and that's the first golf estate they built. I know in years to come when there are hardly any on the road. They are for sale. They're just mostly not in good condition. These don't really get looked after as much as the hatchback and the convertible and the Vento. So to actually find a clean one will be even harder to find than a hatchback, because it's usually used as a workhorse or hauling the family and everything's all scratched up like this one was. If you used to look on, in fact, I challenge you now, have a look on Facebook now. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not many nice looking estates on the road currently for sale. For sale. And so I know that in 5 or 10 years time, when half of them die off and rust away, this will be worth a lot more money. They're not really worth mega money at the minute. I think they're up for sale now. They sell for about £1,000 plus. I certainly won't be returning any profits off this car if I was to sell it, because nowhere near is it worth what I've put into it, which I'm going to probably mention in another video. Mark 1s and Mark 2s now, in terms of value for money, are nowhere near the Mark 3 level of value for money, because the Mark 1s now, the amount they cost to buy a standard Beta that needs restoration, it's a lot of money. Even Mark 2s, even Corrados, and the next model to catch that is the Mark 3s. Get one while they're still here, get them while the parts are still going. Even picking up rare bits from, like, you know, aftermarket grills and interior pieces. I remember Recaros used to be up for sale all the time. Now hardly. Aftermarket wheels, anything like that, things are starting to become a little bit more scarce, and we'll get to a point where when the Mark 3s are worth money, they'll be worth too much for you to buy, and you'll kick yourself that you didn't listen to this video. So if you did enjoy this video, give it a like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week for another video. Peace.